When the Green Bay Packers drafted Jordan Love, Tyler Dunne was sure it was a stroke of genius. Why was he so sure? He'll tell us on today's show.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Tyler Dunne joins us on the show today to talk about Jordan Love, I would say the original Jordan Love adopter. He was adamant from the jump, came on this show, 4 years ago, after writing a piece saying the Packers had done it again, before we ever saw Jordan Love play, that this was going to work. And he was absolutely right. So I wanted to have him look back, see if he actually thought Jordan Love could be this good, this fast, and see sort of where this goes from here. So let's talk to Ty. Joining me now, our old pal Tyler Dunne, formerly of the Packers Beat, now of Go Long. He and Bob McGinn absolutely crushing it out of draft season. They finally can get their head back above water after all of that stuff, the terrific stuff they're doing over there. Ty, it is great to be with you once again. Before we jump in, I just want to ask, the Aaron Rodgers Bleacher Report story now way in the rear view. Have Packer fans come around on you a little bit? Like, has the tone changed? Because there was a time when it was ugly in those Packers Twitter streets.
Yeah, I think I logged off of Twitter for good when I saw somebody tell me to find a rope in the back of my basement and hang myself. I was like, you know what, that's good. I'll sign off of this for a minute. But hey, you know what? If people want the raw, unfiltered, good, bad, ugly, I'll be here. Go Long will be here. You know, we had a 3-part series on Sean McDermott and the Buffalo Bills, which, to the Bills' credit, we were talking a little before ding and record here. Right back there at One Bills Drive, had a sit down with Brandon Beane. I actually sat down with Sean McDermott, got to know each other a little bit. So yeah, I do give the Bills some credit for the professionalism there, and they never denied a word. But hey, you know what? When you stand by your reporting and you trust your sources, and that's what that was, right? It was similar. It was Aaron Rodgers, Mike McCarthy, figuring out that divorce, figuring out what went wrong with a dash of Ted Thompson in there. And I think it just kind of was jarring to a lot of people at that time, right? Like, well, there was a side to Aaron Rodgers people didn't know.
The Aaron Rodgers is different now. Like, the way Packers fans view Aaron Rodgers now is so fundamentally different from the way it was then that I wonder how many people in hindsight have changed just sort of the way they view a lot of that stuff.
Oh, totally. Yeah, the goalposts have definitely moved for a lot of people. For sure. So yeah, to answer your question, I think it has changed. I think the tone has changed, and Aaron Rodgers will go down as one of the greatest players in team history and NFL history, without a doubt. He was spectacular. He's a 4-time MVP for a reason. It just got to the point where the talent didn't justify the nonsense. Mm-hmm. And the Packers finally had enough, and they knew. That's the thing, Pete. Like, the stuff that I reported on with Aaron Rodgers and what was happening behind the scenes and how he dealt with teammates, how he dealt with coaching, I'm sure that was only a fraction of reality. Matt LaFleur then lived it. Brian Gutekunst absolutely lived it. Let's not forget that there was a report that he needed Brian Gutekunst fired to return to Green Bay the summer of 2021. To my knowledge, That was not refuted by the quarterback himself. So yeah, they know what they were dealing with, and he just became an old, ornery, more immobile quarterback that didn't want to work with those young teammates, and they said, okay, see ya. If they did a little sooner, they might have gotten a few draft picks out of it. But you know what? Maybe Jordan Love wasn't quite ready then as he was 3 years in, too. So you got to give Green Bay that.
And to your credit, and I will be doing that a lot on this interview, not just because you're here, but to your credit, you wrote that a year before they traded him that they needed to just do it, just rip the Band-Aid off, go into that. I actually want to back up even further because being where I am, I'm actually at my in-laws right now. The last time or the first time maybe I had you on, it must have been after that. But you wrote after they drafted Jordan Love in 2020, the Packers have done it again. They did something that no one else is willing to do. And you were pretty sure then it was going to work. Can we just, with the understanding that hindsight changes the way that we think about these things, why were you so sure then that what they did was what ended up happening? And that is really smart.
No doubt. It's twofold. I think the Packers, obviously it's different in Green Bay without an owner. And when I left the beat and was able to really parachute into other markets and get an understanding of other teams that do have an owner, it was jarring to hear stories of a Jerry Jones sticking his nose into situations in Dallas. And I think we all know it's different in Dallas.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we could talk about the Cowboys
for a lot of reasons.
And then the stories. Yeah. There isn't exactly an owner in Green Bay in the draft room sharing stories of his sexual escapades with his daughter sitting right there. That
yikes. Yeah.
Heard that this offseason in Dallas. But yeah, it's not just Dallas. It's, I would say more than half of the teams in the league at least have an owner who has a very loud influence on personnel decisions. And they're looking at numbers. They want asses in seats. They've got to sell tickets. Their antenna's up. They're not having press conferences, so we don't really hear from these people, but they are influencing the roster in a very negative way. And that's not the case in Green Bay. You can draft a quarterback and let that quarterback sit for a year, 2 years, 3 years. That's not realistic when you have owners who need to see results right now. Remember that shot of Arthur Blank, talking to Terry Fontenot, the Falcons GM, after they took Michael Penix? It looked like Fontenot was explaining to him why we just drafted a quarterback. And to Blank's credit, I mean, he had to have signed off on that draft pick and been okay with it. That was such a brief window into that relationship that I'm sure is true everywhere. Even now, this week, you've got Joe Shane talking to John Mara and the New York Giants and letting him in on some of those decisions.
Yeah.
So I think that is huge, that you've got, it's just different in Wisconsin. But then Jordan Love himself, the more I talk to people around him, a David Yost as coordinator at Utah State, Steve Calhoun, who has worked with him since he's 15 years old in high school, teammates, right? It's Yossi Mariner, several of his receivers. And I get it. Like, the people close to the quarterback are not necessarily going to say a lot of negative things about the quarterback, but his strengths to me were strengths that translated to the NFL. Aside from the big arm and the athleticism, this is a mentally tough human being on the field, off the field, everything he's been through. You start there. He's got a willingness to work. Josh Allen here opened my eyes in Buffalo, where he's wildly inaccurate. I think it was like 52% as a rookie. Yeah, but he worked at it. Like, that is, you can improve in certain ways as a quarterback. And I just feel like that the Jordan Love, between his work ethic, his mental toughness, his build, his game, all of that, the fact that he could sit and wait and learn, it was a perfect situation. And I just felt like he could correct what needed to be corrected. And I'm not there every day like the day-to-day beat writers are. And I know that those training camp reports were ugly out of Jordan Love, but they were ugly for Aaron Rodgers too. And it wasn't necessarily that pretty for Brett Favre early on, but with patience, they had something special all along.
All right, more with our pal Ty in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. It's baseball season, which means there's a ton of games for you to get to. And there's nothing else to watch sports-wise on TV, so you might as well go to the game. Baseball's really fun. Get a couple drinks, a couple sodas if you want, doesn't matter. Some peanuts. The food at baseball is great because you don't have to worry about doing it between plays. And Game Time can get you in last minute. Sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more, not just baseball. You can save up to 60% when you buy last minute. And if you find another ticket in the same section and row for less money, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. They will credit you That's the guarantee. The Game Time best price guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying baseball tickets or any kind of tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I think sometimes when you have the loud charisma guys at quarterback, it becomes easy. Hey, Jameis Winston, we know that guy's a leader. He was a leader as a freshman at Florida State. It can be harder when you're not the like rah-rah Drew Brees, Tom Brady leader. And by the way, those guys evolve into that in a lot of cases. Jordan Love he's got this sort of quiet confidence, but everyone, and you did it when you did the reporting, everyone I talked to going back to his high school coach was like, no, he has this quiet confidence where you just look at him and you go, yeah, he knows that we can do this. And I think sometimes we miss on guys like that because it's not obvious. It's not in your face that he is this incredible leader, but listen to the guys talking about him and the way that the young players immediately, like, okay, Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks and all those guys, they're working with Jordan Love spring 1 in the NFL. Like that speaks to his leadership. And I think that was something that you wrote about. Like these guys, they had belief in him. And especially that last year, Utah, he was the only reason they were going to win any of those games.
Totally. I mean, compare Jordan Love that last year at Utah State to Tua Tagovailoa at Alabama.
Oh,
you know, and I like Tua, but he's surrounded by 5 stars. Your receivers are open by 5 to 7 yards. You've got all day to throw. I mean, Jordan Love, you put on some of those games, he's running for his life, play to play, drive to drive. All the graduation losses, all of the injuries. I think that season and that sold the Packers. Like they saw a quarterback who could improvise and they saw a game that could translate. His teammate caught a lot of flack by some people out there who cover the team when he said, this is COC Mariner, that there's a Patrick Mahomes quality to Jordan Love's game. That he can throw off platform. He can throw at different arm angles. It does not have to be clean. It does not have to be perfect. That is an NFL trait that translates. But to your point, Peter, on that just laser beam focus, to not get too high, not get too low, it's different, right? Generations of Packer fans have seen Brett Favre play with his emotions on his sleeve, like tackling.
It's why we loved him.
In the end zone. It's why you love him.
Yeah.
Like you've seen that out of Brett Favre. Hoisting the helmet up in Super Bowl 31. Everything, playing right after his dad dies, the emotion that he played with was palpable. It's palpable with Aaron Rodgers when he's cussing out a coach, cussing out a teammate. He's telling Bears fans, I effing own you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all over the spectrum with him as well. So it is different with Jordan Love when he hardly reacts to anything good, anything bad. But then he gets down by 3 scores in his first game at Lambeau Field against the Saints. And he's got that mental toughness, again, that trait he's had all along, to just kind of shake it off and lead a comeback win in the fourth quarter. The first half of the season, disastrous at times, right? And David Bakhtiari, 55 snaps. Aaron Jones is in and out. Christian Watson in and out. Brian Gutekunst says himself in so many words, we better see something from Jordan Love. We're going to find another quarterback. And then he's the best quarterback in the NFL from mid-November on. So this is who he's always been. Like you said, from high school to college to the pros. I was speaking to somebody who has been around Jordan Love day in and day out there at 1265 Lombardi. And this person told me that his greatest strength is that ability to not get fooled twice. Fool him once as a defensive coordinator, whatever. Like he's not going to make that mistake again. He'll log it. He'll remember it. And he'll fix it. I think that's what we saw in his first year as a starter.
Well, and certainly Packer fans are hoping that that's the case after the way the season ended. But that's the reason that anecdote sticks out to me is because we've heard Aaron Rodgers say that about young players. Like they're going to make mistakes. I don't want them to make the same mistake twice. Fix it. And so it's just interesting that is Jordan Love. That is exactly what you need from Jordan Love. So understanding that you had the early belief, all of that, did you think, and I was there with you, but did you think he could be the guy he was by the end of the season, the guy blowing out the Cowboys in the playoffs? Did you think he could be that good this fast?
Maybe not that good. Maybe not that fast, right? He was statistically, by certain measures, the best quarterback
A lot
in
of
the
them, yeah.
NFL. Or right up until that ill-advised throw across the body in Santa Clara. That's a throw he absolutely would want back. But yeah, I mean, I was surprised to see him do what he did with a collection of first and second year receivers all over the place. I mean, this is the youngest team to make the playoffs, right, in the modern era. It's unbelievable what he was able to do late in the season. And I got to say this too, like, I know I've been extremely critical of Aaron Rodgers, and this is just relaying what coaches and teammates and opponents have told me over the years. I think that Aaron Rodgers was a very positive force in Jordan Love's development too. Yeah. Like I've been told, like, behind the scenes, he did really help him, right? And knowing that this is a quarterback who's going to replace him one day. I don't think that Aaron Rodgers, now there was that offseason that he held the team hostage and he basically dared Green Bay, oh, you drafted this guy that's not ready, go ahead and start him. Good luck. So, that's there too. But I think that, even if it's just the way he
was
plays,
more about the team than Love, right? And Rodgers always made that distinction. Like, it has nothing to do with Jordan Love and everything to do with what he represents and the action that was taken by the team. That was what he didn't like.
Oh yeah, we heard it in the airing of grievances press conference too, right? Which, man, some of those names that he was listed off, Tom Silverstein, I give him so much credit for pointing out to Aaron in that press conference. Well, the team was correct to move on from a lot of those players you just mentioned. That's what they do.
Almost all of them. Yeah.
You move on a year early, not a year late. And that's how you sustain winning. But yeah, I just wanted to note that. I think that Aaron Rodgers did really help this guy behind the scenes. And you watch Jordan Love's game, especially that Dallas game that you mentioned, it looked a lot like Aaron Rodgers, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of the throws he was making, it was peak Aaron Rodgers.
I want to talk about, you mentioned the young team. That to me is the one thing more than the Jordan Love thing, for all the reasons that you mentioned at the top about the pressure to play these young quarterbacks is just too great. And most teams don't draft a quarterback when you have a Hall of Famer. Like, Kirk Cousins may not be that good in a year. We don't even know how good he's going to be this year coming off Achilles. But the thing that I think I'd like to see more teams copy, and we didn't know if it was going to work before the year, is the approach the Packers took with their skill position players. All first and second year guys, and they produced at a high level. I've always wondered why teams feel like they need to go out and sign that 12-year vet who can't really run anymore as like a coach on the field. No, you pay coaches for that. Get the most talented players. And I wonder if you think that is something that is a translatable thing for other teams too.
Philosophically, I think Green Bay just nailed it. This is what every team should be doing. Draft a quarterback when you don't need one. If you piss off your Hall of Fame starter, so be it. So be it.
And how many
Aaron
teams
Rodgers
have one of
said
those?
he had
Like
the tequila
3.
that night,
so
right?
Who cares? Yeah.
Completely. I mean, Pittsburgh got caught with their pants down with Ben Roethlisberger at the end. New England with Tom Brady, that was clunky, where Brady still had something left, but then you picked the wrong guy. New Orleans with Drew Brees, like you're trying to squeeze out one more run in him. I get it. It's going to be hard to move on from a guy, but if you have conviction in a quarterback and you're picking at the end of the first round, I don't know why you wouldn't just take him and let him sit. I mean, the only downside is you're in the position Green Bay is in now, where you've got to pay him $55 million a year and you don't have a big sample size to work on.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a pretty good downside to have if you're a franchise. If you got to believe in the guy, you got to pick the right guy, but there's such a value to sitting for 3 years. And then you couple that with what you just said, just drafting weapons nonstop on those cost control deals. Let those players learn and grow with a quarterback behind the scenes. Jordan Love is thrown to these guys, not only in practice, not only in OTAs and minicamp, but he got together in the offseason on his own. I mean, they did a ton behind the scenes to get to this point. So they're hungry, by the way, too, right? Like, these are all guys on first-year contracts with a lot to prove. Something to be said for that. You've got the financial flexibility to kind of flesh out a roster beyond a high-priced position at wide receiver. Here in Buffalo, I think that was one of Brandon Beane's mistakes, and Beane has done a good enough job. This is a team that should at least have won Super Bowl by now with Josh Allen. But since they drafted Josh Allen up until this year when they took Keon Coleman, I believe they've taken one wide receiver or tight end in the first 4 rounds, Gabe Davis. They just have not been drafting receivers.
They just let him walk. He didn't even re-sign with the team.
Right. And they traded for Stephon Diggs, and they signed Cole Beasley and John Brown, but still rookie receivers on that contract, such a value. In Green Bay, just in 2-3 year span, they loaded up. And then that's what you see, a team that was a breath away from the NFC Championship game.
All right, we'll finish up with Ty Dunne in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now available on the Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. This is a question I love to ask people now that we have this full picture, because Aaron Rodgers was the obvious answer if you were skeptical of Matt LaFleur. Well, he's got Aaron Rodgers. Like, what do you want me to say? But now he doesn't. And now it's Jordan Love. And maybe now people will say, like in a year, people will say, well, he's got Jordan Love. But how has your perception of Matt LaFleur from the outside, and maybe based on some of the things that you've heard, you mentioned, some of the conversations you've had with people in the building, how has your perception of him as a coach changed? And with the understanding that, by the way, we all saw it, Matt, on draft night when the Packers drafted Jordan Love and you fist pumped at your desk. We all saw it. We were there. You can't pretend like you were not all in on that pick. Anyway, but to this perception question, how has it changed now that we've seen it again with another iteration of this Packers team?
There were so many moments this past season where I was just thinking, man, how refreshing is this for Matt LaFleur to call a play? The quarterback runs the play. Certain plays are setting up future plays. You're getting into rhythm. You're getting in sync. Now, it took a while. It was ugly there for the first half of the season, but just all of these brilliant offensive minds, they all have egos. Even when Aaron Rodgers is winning MVPs, it had to have been difficult at times for Matt LaFleur to be the head coach of a team with an offense that had 2 different playbooks. There was his playbook, and then there was Aaron Rodgers' playbook. Mm-hmm. And Aaron Rodgers' playbook was great most of the time. He's getting them out of bad plays and putting them in good plays often. So it's not necessarily like a hit at Aaron Rodgers by any means, but Matt LaFleur got the job because he came from that coaching tree, because of his X's and O's. So, yeah, I think we're seeing that all come to fruition. And I didn't know what to make of him, honestly. I think it's lazy for us all to sit here and, Sean McVay's barista gets hired and we just assume this person's going to be in the playoffs. And all these guys have their own brains. They have their own offenses, and they're always evolving, by the way. Like Sean McVay himself, the offense that he changed football with, you think back to Todd Gurley and Jared Goff, that offense is dead. I mean, the one he has with Matt Stafford is totally different than that one. So you've got to be able to evolve. I didn't know what to expect. I think it was right after that Bleacher Report story. So it was shortly after Matt LaFleur was hired. I had a player just call me out of the blue who played for the Packers and was giving me more stories from, he wasn't even a source on that. He had more stories to share about Rodgers and McCarthy. And he goes, oh, by the way, like this offense coming in, and he's speaking more from the Nate Hackett side of things. He had intel on Hackett and knew a lot of players who played for Hackett. He's like, it's really basic. It's going to be ugly. Aaron's going to hate it. This isn't going to be good. And so I wasn't really sure like how the Hackett element would fit into LaFleur's offense. And now Hackett is Aaron's guy in New York.
That's so
a lot of different voices. A lot
that
of
ended up
coaches.
Working perfectly.
Right. Just take them off with you, Aaron. Knock yourself out. But yeah, I think we're seeing what a Matt LaFleur offense looks like, what a Matt LaFleur team looks like, and would not be surprised one bit if the Green Bay Packers are in the Super Bowl and win it this early.
And that is a pretty remarkable thing to say to your, 2020 fall of 2022 self, even because of how that all looked with Rodgers, and they couldn't win, or even 2023 self, like for 2 falls in a row. It was like, oh, how is this going to look? And so now they're in a pretty different position here.
One point too, like, because I see here in Buffalo with Diggs, right? And there's a lot of different variables to the Bills trading Stephon Diggs. But in so many words, when I sat down with Bean, he was saying he's looking for players that can win in the playoffs. Who's going to rise up in that playoff moment?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we can overlook the fact that Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs has struggled, hasn't been quite as good as he was in the regular season.
Yep.
At the end, right? At the end. And I don't think it was a driving force to trade Aaron Rodgers, but I'm sure it was in the back of the minds of LaFleur and Gutekunst and everybody that love being ready, being young and blissfully ignorant to those playoff moments. Throw him in there, maybe get a different result. Remember at the end of Favre's time too, I got to think Mike McCarthy in that NFC Championship game against the Giants, there had to have been part of him thinking, how does Aaron Rodgers do in this game? Right?
Yeah.
Favre looked like he didn't want anything to do with that game. So I don't know. I think that playoff performance gets weighed heavily in decisions like that too.
Both Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers ended their careers in do or die moments, throwing interceptions. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they went to the young guy right after that. So that's just, you're absolutely right about that. Ty, this was great as always. I don't always intentionally lead you into the Rodgers shade, but of course I always enjoy it. So I appreciate the time. Everyone go subscribe to Go Long. And we always appreciate the work that you do here, Ty.
Hey, thank you so much, Peter. And thanks everybody out there for reading, for subscribing. We've got, a ton of Packer fans who have joined our community. So greatly appreciate you all.
All right. Thanks to Ty for joining the show. Awesome to talk with him. We've got, I think, just one more show this week. We'll see what we can get scheduled, but I think just one more show on Friday with Bailey Burmaster now in Atlanta. We're going to talk Javon Bullard. Can't wait to do that one. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. I don't think Google Podcasts exists anymore, but it doesn't matter. You know where you get podcasts. So go get this one there. We're there, I promise. And we're all over the social medias. Instagram, we're there. TikTok, we're there. YouTube, we're there. So you can stay Locked On Packers.